To customize our app's typography, we need to start by loading the fonts we want to use. Discord actually uses two fonts. One is Whitney for the base text, which we can see if we hover over one of these elements. This will show us that the base font is 16 pixels and Whitney. And then we have some title fonts here. Right here we're using Ginto. So over in our app, we'll add Ginto and Whitney, but because they're premium fonts, we'll also add Open Sans as an open source fallback. So the first step is to actually load the fonts. So I'll come over to my desktop where I have the fonts here, and then I'll just drop them right here in my project's public folder. And you can see we have 1 weight of Ginto and we have 4 weights of Whitney. Next, I'll create a styles.css file, and I'll paste in all the font face rules. Then, because this is a Next project and I want these styles available globally, I'll just come over to my app.js and import my new style sheet. Now at this point, nothing's changed, but if we've wired this up correctly, we should be able to just drop a div right here and set the font family directly on the style attribute equal to Whitney and see a change right there. And indeed, it looks like Whitney is now rendering here. And similarly, if we were to use Ginto, we should also see that work as well. Now let's come over and make a new file called document, which is where we'll load our open source fallback. In Next.js, the base document looks like this, which just gives us a head tag here. And because the Open Sans font is on Google Fonts, all we need to do is just paste some link tags that we got straight from Google Fonts. And you can see right here, we're loading the Open Sans font. Now if we come back to our app and try out Open Sans, we should see yet another font right here. And indeed we do. So all 3 of our fonts are being loaded into our project now. There's lots of ways to load fonts depending on what tools you're using. But now that our fonts are loaded, we can actually customize Tailwind to consume those fonts. So the way to do this is to head on over to Tailwind config. And under theme extend, we're going to extend the font family module. Now by default, Tailwind applies the Sans font family to our whole site. So if we actually just overwrite this with Whitney, then like magic, we'll actually see all of this text default to Whitney. And that's exactly what we want, so that's a great starting point. Now, it's best practice to specify fallback fonts in case users can't get your preferred font for whatever reason, and we can do that in Tailwind's config using an array. So after Whitney, we'll go ahead and add Open Sans. And let's just say, you're not using Whitney in Ginto or the user couldn't load it. So we'll just comment out this import as if these fonts weren't loaded. And we'll actually see here that now Open Sans is being rendered. And we can verify that by inspecting one of these elements, coming to computed, and seeing that the rendered font right here is actually Open Sans. So we'll go back to Whitney, and just to button this up, we actually want to add the rest of Tailwind's default Sans stack to the end of this list. Basically, we just want to append Whitney and Open Sans to the default stack. And we can do that by coming up here and importing the default theme directly from the Tailwind CSS npm package. And then down in our Sans declaration, we can splat the array of the default theme.fontfamily.sans. And now we're still seeing Whitney rendered, but to verify our fallbacks made it through to the actual CSS declaration, we can just take a look and see what the font family rule is for this element. And there we see it's Whitney first priority, then Open Sans, then UI Sans Serif, and the rest of the default stack. Okay, so we've updated the base font that's used for all of our text in our app, but we have one more font to add. So let's come back to our Tailwind config, and we'll just define a new key here. This can be whatever we want. Let's call it title since it's used really for titles in this app. And we'll basically do the same thing. We want to use Ginto first, Open Sans second, And because Ginto is a Sans font, we'll go ahead and grab the default Sans stack as well. Okay, so these keys give us the font sans and font title utility classes. We didn't have to explicitly use font sans because Tailwind applies it to the root. But if we go ahead and open our index page and find this piece of text right here, now we can add font title. So let's go ahead and add font title. And we can see right there, the IntelliSense has already picked up our custom key. And just like that, now we have Ginto as a title font in our app. And if we Alt-Tab back to Discord here, we can see our clone is starting to look much more like the real thing. It's pretty incredible how much of an effect these fonts have on your UIs. We can even see the server title in Discord is actually white. And the channel titles here are using a slightly bolder font weight. Let's try font medium. So again, just some tweaks to show you that, Tailwind is really an engine for creating your own app's design system. Here we are able to match this production app basically perfectly so far, but just because Tailwind ships with default values for typography doesn't mean you should be afraid to customize them on your own. Being able to tweak Tailwind exactly in the way you need for the UI that you're building is really one of my favorite things about Tailwind.